All right, greetings, stranger. Hope you're doing well today. And this video, is really going to be me basically pouring out thoughts on thoughts, and it is going to be themed, right? It won't be too metaphysical in nature. At least I don't think it will. But this is kind of like you can think of it as almost like the kind of like the journal entry, maybe some of the more, you know, journal entry, personal thoughts, captain's log report, if you will, of someone who is striving to become a scientist, someone who wants to better understand how the world works, has a calling to, understand or discover some deeper aspect of society, maybe civilization, maybe a few like trinkets of life along the way. But this one is definitely dedicated to programming more than anything. And there's some kind of essence about programming. I've been technically learning how to program since 2020, since COVID. So I've been, on and off, not very consistently. I don't think so. Consistently inconsistent, I would say, learning how to program for now 6 years. And I can tell you now that it's still very much a mystery to me. It's very much an enigma, very similar to the enigma used in the German U-boats. And me, like a British intelligence officer right now, I'm trying to kind of hack the code of this enigma and trying to understand how it functions. And so at the present moment, a lot of my energy is being put into understanding a computer language, right? And I've been wrestling between learning JavaScript. I got myself relatively familiar with HTML, okay with CSS, although CSS is, quite a can of worms. Gets very messy. But, I wanted to learn JavaScript. I've been wanting to learn C++, but for whatever reason, I've had this kind of learning barrier. And for many, many years, being someone who went to university, went to school, I believed that the issue was something wrong with me, that there was something wrong with my ability to focus, could be a discipline issue, consistency, all these other things, right? But when I look back at my years of, say, playing video games, which is one area of life that I actually was able to flourish quite a bit, I learned a lot while playing video games. I was able to do quite a good job of it too. I realized that I'm actually a great learner. I have the ability to learn really, really, really well. I'm an excellent learner. And, I'm pretty sure the school system would probably say something like ADHD. I know that I have some kind of autism. So, learning has not been a linear process, to put it lightly. It's probably more of a polygamous, some kind of, mathematical curve. But all that said, I mean, those are all kind of like, so I dare I say, call them something like an excuse or a distraction, perhaps. The reality is that my mind, myself, learns in a particular way. And I believe that every human being, more or less, has a unique learning style. And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges of, society and cultures in general, is learning how to learn. And I know that in the West, we have this big drive to learn, right? We have this huge incentive to learn. And a lot of the culture has been built on learning. I mean, that's why the university system is as powerful as it is, because it is a central place to learn for education. And so, not to get too caught up into all the details, the main message here is the learning with regards to something like programming. I mean, what is computer science? What is programming in general? And I would say it's mathematical like. It's like mathematics, but it seems to have, I would say, more, maybe like more practical application than mathematics does. Although mathematics is technically everywhere. Anything having to do with numbers is mathematics. But obviously, like when you dive into mathematics, I mean, there is several layers of depth when it comes to mathematics. You kind of have the basic surface level, which is like arithmetic and algebra. But then if you go deeper, I mean, eventually you're entering like matrices, you're entering all kinds of like really intricate abstract algebra with all kinds of Greek symbols. And then, of course, there are like types of mathematics which suggest the very fabric of reality is fundamentally different than the way we perceive. There's deep connections between mathematics and quantum mechanics. One influences the other influences the other. And basically, it's a depth of understanding, dare I say, discovering some kind of aspect of life that frankly at my stage in development is beyond my full comprehension, but I know that it goes very deep. And I do like this idea that God is logic, God is math, something like this. And I think a lot of cultures would agree with that there's this understanding that pursuing rationality, logic, mathematics is in a way understanding God, because there is like this way of understanding that God created so much, created the universe. And I think their primary tool, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but the primary tool was something like mathematics. Well, this is where like programming and computer science becomes so relevant, because it's almost as if programming is like an applied mathematics in a sense. And it's like if God created the universe, he may have been a programmer, right? And so when I sit there and I start to program, I can't help but feel like super dead inside, like super dead. I feel super dead. And a lot of that may be because of like all the emotions and all the sentimentalities and all the feelings that I carry as a human being day to day. And so when I actually get into a programming space, it's almost like I'm being confronted with this like either false self or true self, one of the two. And I'm being confronted and I'm like being challenged to sort of like swallow the red pill in a sense. I'm talking about The Matrix. In the movie The Matrix, great film, highly recommend it. You basically have the blue pill or the red pill. And I believe programmers, by and large, are taking the red pill, but they are somehow programming the blue pill. And it's almost like, as programmers, there's this kind of aspect of confronting the reality of reality in a sense, because it's all based on logic. The whole system, the whole programming language is based on a logical syntax, and it's based on algorithms and so forth. And so I find myself, frankly, in being as practical as I can here, I find myself facing this deep sadness when I program. And I'm sending this message out to people because I don't believe a lot of people actually have the courage to talk about this in this way. But my intuition tells me that a lot of people have a similar experience. And so that actually makes me wonder, man, how is it that programmers are able to become so good at programming? Especially people like, Sam Altman, he's more of a systems engineer now. But I'm sure in his early years, I mean, thinking about building something like artificial intelligence, I mean, my goodness, like you're just, facing this kind of deep, kind of like metaphysical confrontation with life itself. And you're like wondering, like, what is life? What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? These kind of questions do pop into my mind when I start to program much more. And I think another part of me also thinks a lot about like, what are human beings doing here on this planet? And there's a lot of science fiction implications with all of this too. And if you've read anything like Isaac Asimov and his books, you can't help but like wonder, like, where's humanity going? And without a doubt, programming languages are going to play a big role in this, in the development of the future of human society and civilization. Not the only part, there's a lot of other aspects to explore as well. But I would say, like, as of 2026, computer science has to be one of the fortes of Western civilization, different than other civilizations that came before us. Although I'm sure they had a lot of advanced algorithms as well. But it's like, my goodness, where are we going with this? Is this the good thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? There's this saying that good intentions pave the road to hell. That's from Alan Watts. And, kind of, I can't help but sort of really kind of like where the rubber meets the road kind of saying, meet this sort of like scientific reality, or this sort of scientific confrontation that I believe more or less every scientist is confronted with in their endeavor to seek the truth. And when you're programming, you may not even be entirely seeking the truth, but you are trying to create a logical system that's based on some kind of truth system, which is the nature of logic itself. And so it's amazing to me how these computers, you put in a few commands and it gives you not sort of the right answer or sort of the answer you were looking for. It gives you the exact answer that you're looking for. And that is like shocking. Like, how is it that the system is operating at 100% efficiency? Well, I'll say something like this. And yet, so much of the rest of life is not at 100% efficiency, right? Whether it's economics, whether it's how like nature seems to grow, it doesn't seem like it's operating at 100% efficiency. There seems to be a lot of inefficiencies out in the world. I know that for like, the operating systems of computers, the hardware, on the hardware side of things, you don't have things always operating at 100% efficiencies. Things can break, things can fail. And this is also somewhat true with the actual programming languages themselves, right? And so there's a whole nother dimension of debugging that I know that I really look forward to in my life eventually. God willing, as the saying goes in Spanish, si Dios deja, which basically means if God allows, I can get myself to that like other side of the mountain or the other side of the hill, other side of the valley, if you will. And I can get to that place of debugging because I feel my intuition tells me that I'm going to be a lot more comfortable as a programmer in the debugging space, because then you're kind of like, you can start realizing, oh, wait a minute, the reality of programming is that it's messy like so many other aspects of life itself. It's not 100% perfect or 100% efficient, at least from the human perspective. And so I guess the part that really sort of shakes me to my core is how, just a few basic lines, the typical hello world. I would rather call it hi world, not hello. But, the whole point is, you get a few lines, you can put in the name, hi Diego, and it responds, hello Diego. And basically it's like, wow, it worked. And so part of my system, like, frankly, shuts down in this way. And I think it's because I'm just processing a lot of information when we feel this programming, but it's kind of awesome too. It's kind of like this relief, like, my gosh, it worked. It actually worked, and it gave me exactly what I was looking for, no more, no less. And it's like, wow, what a refreshing experience that is, when so much of life isn't about that, right? There's so many kinds of logic to explore, and I don't think all logic is 100% about like give and go in a sense. Or maybe that is logic, but maybe like, intuition versus rationality may be more of this sort of, mechanism or set of mechanisms that describe, how we beings communicate with one another. And so, it's fascinating to me how like exact these programming languages are. And yet at the same time, the history and the development of these programming languages is kind of odd, like JavaScript, for example, kind of like, at least the way they teach it, kind of has like this magical element about it. And they sort of have like these kind of creative nuances for as far as like how the language was built. And I don't really 100% see the logical nature. And so this is why C++ to me is something of a curiosity, because from what I understand, it's harder to learn, but it at least seems to have like a more robust approach to the nature of the logic itself. So that's kind of a curiosity to me. But maybe there's more programming languages to learn that are out there. But I'm pretty sure the best programming language to learn would be the one that's the most logical. That's what I would think. And so, yeah, there's like so many different languages to choose from. This is where computer science seems to deviate a lot from mathematics, because by and large, mathematics has more or less one language. The symbols are relatively constant between the different types of mathematics. But in programming languages, I guess the logic is more or less the same. So, you have that going for it. But there's obviously some slight nuances there as well. So, yeah, I wanted to share this moment with other people out there. I could have kept all this information to myself, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But as part of the learning process, or rather, what I like to call the learning process, it seems like it would be more efficient. I'm under the impression that it would be more efficient. It would be perhaps, dare I say, simpler, either easier or simpler, one of the two, to learn with other people. And since we're living in the age of the internet, where the university system is not the only system to rely upon as far as learning goes, I find that maybe the most valuable thing I can do is learn how to leverage this kind of platform and realize that the internet is not this mysterious place where it's oh my gosh, all this bizarre information exists, but actually realize that it's simply a learning tool to communicate with other human beings here in the present moment. Because there is a rich history of the internet, a long history, and you can find old web pages on the internet and so forth. And so that's kind of oh my gosh, it's you can get lost in the forest that is the internet, this vast forest of information. But I think right now, at least for this video, something like this video, and I think what this channel may be dedicated towards, is communicating with people here in the now. And so you may not actually see this video exactly when I uploaded it, but you may see it within a few weeks, a few months, and more or less within the same times as me creating this video. And we are living in a special time in humanity by and large, so it kind of makes sense. So yeah, this message is just dedicated to anyone out there who is wanting to learn how to program, but may find themselves facing these sort of existential questions about reality and life and so forth, when they do something like programming, which is one of the most pragmatic ways to explore science, right? At least the scientific method to some degree, something like this, given how computers work and given the empirical sort of input-output, command to information return that computers do. They're very much send the message received. So, transmission sent, transmission received. And so they're very much like that in and out sort of process, similar to some kind of chemical reactor or chemical reaction in some sort of batch reactor where you have some sort of set of elements going inside a chamber, and then some sort of elements coming out, some sort of new product or some output coming out. And so this input-output mechanism is very relevant to the nature of how computers work. So that's kind of the basic nature of a function, right? That's the nature of a mathematical function, and even a programming function. And so, yeah, this message, again, I'm not here to really give practical advice because I'm in the learning process, but I wanted to share my experience and share my story, where I am in the process, because, for anyone who's empathetic out there, I'm sure this can resonate and be of value to you. And simply let you know that, I'm maybe about 80%, 70% confident, something like that, 70, 80% confident, maybe even 90% confident that what, you and I are going through is not weird necessarily, or not something that doesn't make any sense. It may be something that our university system hasn't fully recognized. I'm very confident that there are certain teachers who are fully aware of this sort of kind of internal experience that anyone who's trying to learn logic is going through, especially programming specifically, because given how you can hold the machine that actually does that input-output mechanism. But I simply say, something like what the math sorcerer would say, definitely keep trying, definitely keep giving it a go. But, as far as the way I'm doing it, it's I definitely find myself having to like recharge my energy when it comes to learning something as profound as like the Hello World programming command system, because my goodness, it works so well. It's so simple. It's such a simple tool that has such profound implications. And this is where, like big shout out to all the successful programmers out there, like senior developers, because they're obviously able to operate like this at a much faster level. And, they still, I'm sure it still kind of hit them hard, those first early moments of learning how to program. And so, yeah, I wish you the best as far as learning how to program. Certainly comments and questions down below if you want to kind of share any kind of moments you've had as far as like the challenges with the nature of programming. But I'm here to say that something tells me it's simply kind of like our human monkey brain that is kind of like learning how to learn this sort of like new, deeper logical implication that may or may not take us to a higher place or to a higher power or something like this. At least as far as like, I mean, I'm sure if you ever seen like really cool science fiction technologies and whatnot, like a lot of it seems to suggest that they had very advanced computers, right? And they were built, these were machines built by human beings or built by another species. And it's like, whoa, this is like really, really, really intense stuff. So yeah, probably we'll wrap it up here. I mean, saying all this has not given me any relief. It's like, oh my gosh, this is only like getting me like more like it's like giving me more like I don't know, like not hyperventilation, but it's like I'm trying to like stay calm and like keep my nerves grounded, So yeah, I think there's not much more that we can do. It's simply the nature of the machine, nature of how the tools work. And so, there's really nothing else to do but to keep exploring, to keep trying. I believe that's really, the only way to, try to get to this like deeper, kind of this deeper implication, this deeper message. And it's like, the only way to go is to kind of face that fear, have some courage, and to kind of take another step forward into the journey. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say in this message. As the saying goes, happy programming. But if you're one of those people who like is not really in the pursuit of happiness, but rather in the pursuit of peace, as far as like your mind goes and, your soul and so forth, then, I would say like, steady programming. Rather than say happy programming, I would say something like steady programming. And may your programming be steady.